Cool. So, hi, Greg Ward. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Nice to meet you, Oliver.
Good to meet you too, and thanks for coming on the first. I don't know what we're going to call this yet. I guess the Deep Cuts podcast. This is pretty preliminary. I'm not really sure yet, but welcome anyway. Just thanks for coming on and chatting about. Want to have a chat about your musical inspirations, the projects you've got going on. What drives you musically, and hopefully introduce you to a load more people on the channel. Really.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, that'll be
No,
fun.
right. Excellent. Good. I'm looking forward to it. Right. So, I guess starting out, it'd be great to get a bit more of an understanding about what pushed you into jazz in the first place.
Well, I would have to say that goes back to my family's love of music on both sides, really. My grandmother always had a lot of old videos with with jazz musicians in it, specifically the Benny Goodman story. I would go over to her house and wear this thing out. And I don't know if you're familiar with this movie, but Benny Goodman had a film made about him, about the early beginnings of his career, and it featured
Right.
him and his band and a bunch of other great musicians like Gene Krupa and Louis Armstrong
Oh
and
man,
you
Gene
know
Krupa, amazing.
yeah, Lionel Hampton and all these folks. But anyway, I began as a violinist, and then we also had a saxophone in the house because my dad uh, he used to play alto sax, and he's a great musician, more of an organist and keyboard player these days. But I had an alto sax, so I played alto sax. We couldn't afford drums, which is really what I wanted to play.
Yeah, pretty
So
pretty big instrument as well, isn't it? It takes up a lot of
yeah,
space.
yeah. And so that's the beginning of it. And then, really, the thing that there were two things after that that really set me in motion to pursue this as a lifelong passion. I would say number one would be that in my hometown of Peoria, Illinois, there was a prodigy saxophone player who was just one grade ahead of me. And I could hear this guy who was 12 years old who sounded like he was 30 years old. And so I would tell my dad, I want to play like that, you know. And and then also a little later, I found out who Charlie Parker was, and once from one listening of Charlie Parker, that was it. I knew that I would be involved in music forever. So
Yeah, and I guess it's it's an important. I think what's interesting because I play music, obviously not to your level, and I don't profess to at all. But I started playing the sax when I was about 9, 10 years old. And I had a really not a very engaging teacher at all. He was the sort of guy you play your grades through, but he just wanted to teach you the same old nursery rhymes, and I wanted to play like Baker Street or something. Do you know what I mean? That was the what I wanted to play. So I ended up not staying with it and moving on to drums. Funnily enough, and then I've always wished I'd continued with such a beautiful instrument, the saxophone. It's so expressive, isn't it? And it's unlike any other instrument. And I'm very envious to hear people like yourselves that can harness the power of that instrument so well and just make it so expressive. It's such an impressive thing.
oh man, it's a fun instrument. It has all those qualities that you mentioned, like those characteristics, very vocal like qualities, and if you spend the time really digging into the sound and to the possibilities of the expression of that instrument, and it's a treat. That's
Yeah.
why I do it. I love it. So,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also so versatile across genres. I think people that only listen to a certain type of contemporary music are used to pigeonholing brass instruments into okay, that's jazz or classical music, and they don't realize that when even the music they're listening to uses those instruments in a really interesting way. You have modern musicians that are utilizing those instruments. I mean, recently, obviously, with David passing of David Bowie and people listening to his discography, and you don't realize how much saxophone was part of his life and how much he connected to that instrument, despite not particularly having much of a jazz streak in his music.
I hear you.
That's just interesting. It's interesting. Going on from that as well. I've got to talk about it because obviously that's part of the reason we got in contact in the first place. I talked about your record, "Touch My Beloved's Thought," on my albums of the year video, and I'm not going to gush but I have to say, no, it was without a doubt one of the best things I heard last year, and I'm not just saying that because you've said yes to come on my show, but it's a really impressive album that as a fan of Black Satan Sinner Lady anyway, and I know I'd like to explain about that in a minute to the guys that are listening, but because I really enjoyed that record anyway, and what's great about your album is it manages to be both a throwback and a tribute to that record, but also something entirely within itself, which is such an impressive thing to do. It's that whole dichotomy of new and old, and anachronistic and modern. And I mean, just talk us through how that project even came about, because it's such an interesting project.
So here in Chicago, there are two organizations that work in the same building. Actually, there's a really beautiful venue called Constellation, which is run by one of my closest friends, Mike Reed, and one of their permanent residents is a dance organization that's been around for over 30 years called Lynx Hall. And so the director of Lynx Hall, Roel Schmidt, heard Black Saint and the Sinner Lady, and was just blown away. She was blown away by it. She had never heard it, and so she went to Mike and was like, Mingus intended for this to be done as a ballet. Let's do it. And so Mike was like, I don't think he was too into it. Anyway, he gives me a call, and he says, we're talking about whatever, about the best shows on HBO or something like that, or and he's like, oh, I got this this project. Why don't you just take a listen? He's like, I don't know if I can do this. I'm like, okay. So he sends me a YouTube link to Black Saint and the Sinner Lady, and I check it out, and I'm blown away. And I mean, I hadn't heard it to this point, and I can't believe that I hadn't heard such a masterpiece up until this point.
It's so seminal, isn't it? It's an unbelievable piece of work.
Yeah, and so I was just excited to be a part of it, because Mike is also a great musician, great band leader, and we've been playing together for 14 years now. And so, because he said that it was something he was going to be doing, I figured like maybe I would be involved with it, especially since the original recording is so alto sax. It's such an alto saxophone feature.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I check it out. I tell him, man, that's great. I'm excited. Let me know. And then he comes back to me about like, well, I can't really do this right now. Why don't you do it? And so I was like, sure. And they paired me with this choreographer, Onye Zuzu, who we were, going to get together and decide what we would like to do. Would it be just a transcription of the work? Would it be something like an arrangement of the work? Or would it just be something original, And eventually, after some discussion, we decided to go with doing something original. Because number one, for me, I just don't think you can recreate that work. You can't, even though I could transcribe all those ideas, but just putting it together the way they did, like the producer, you hear it when you listen to the recording. You hear that they're just cutting and pasting things and putting things in an order that they like, and I just don't think that you can really create that again, And you can hear like Mingus yelling in the background.
Yeah.
You hear the band.
It's so naturalistic, isn't it? And it's such a product of its time. And also there wouldn't be anything special, I don't think, in creating something verbatim, would there? But it's just because the magic is what that record was when it came out in '63. So you just as you say, transcribing and copying, it just wouldn't have the vitality that record has, I don't think.
Right. So that as I began to do my research for the project and finding out all the weight that was on this piece of music, like it being heralded as one of the greatest jazz orchestration triumphs of the 20th century and one of the greatest records of all time, it kind of made me nervous, because I realized, like, you're going to be messing with something that people think is sacred, or hold like in such a high regard, that you got to do this well. So it was very important to me to find that balance, the balance of how do I give a tip of the hat to the folks who are looking for the things that really make Black Saint, and how do I get the things that are me in there, and from my perspective, and I think I think it came off pretty well. I also have to say with Onye, the choreographer's input, we had a good amount of time to go back and forth about um, different ideas and to work that out. So that was another element that helped me get in touch with something more personal because on the dance
Mm,
side, there was no, there was no map. The dance had never been done before, so she was
yeah.
creating on her own, and it allowed me to get inside of the ideas that she was presenting. So that's why I feel like it became something more personal than just the music side because we had these other elements at play. So,
Yeah, it's like a multimedia project, isn't it? And it's I would have loved to have seen that performance. I mean, were you planning on doing those performances or touring them, getting the chance to do that, or is it just a logistical nightmare? I can imagine it's a bit of a pain to
it,
transport everything and
exactly. I mean, that's when you do a. Well, I have to give it up to all the people who have been supporting this record since the beginning. It was a project that began in 2014.
mm,
Just talking about it, and I still have all of these people looking for gigs and getting things done now. 3 years later, I mean
mm,
it's an incredible feeling. Because what generally happens in the commission world is that somebody asks you to do a piece and there's a premiere and then that's it. You know,
yeah.
so this has had a lot of legs, and we're in talks to bring the whole thing to Paris next year.
Oh,
And
amazing.
yeah, yeah. And the music is traveling a bit as well. We're going to Poland in May and I believe the North Sea Jazz Fest in July. So we're trying to keep it going, you know.
You've got to come over to the UK. I need to see this live. You've got
Yeah.
to come over to London.
Or maybe we have to talk and see who we have to be in
Yeah,
touch with. Yeah.
definitely, definitely. I mean, yeah, it's just I was because it's an album I've come across, and I do try and keep up with modern jazz as much as possible. Um, and your record is a record that it kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, obviously, I'm not in the jazz circles in America, so I'm looking at it from an outsider's perspective. But you were getting featured on places like NPR and Jazzwise were doing things, and you started kind of cropping up all over the place. And were you surprised at the response you got from the jazz media from this record?
I mean, definitely because you there's no formula to that. You never know what's going to catch on or even what people might enjoy. But I felt like we had a few things working for us. The fact that it combined, such a classic record, as a
Mm,
base, Black Saint. Also, that I had the opportunity to join up with Greenleaf Music, run by
yeah.
Dave Douglas, and he's such a tastemaker himself. And then the dance world as well. Like having that component, I feel pulled a lot of people, a lot of interest. Like I
Mm,
think multimedia projects, get people together. Like
yeah.
you strengthen your audience that way. So and then like luck, a little bit of luck as well. That's it. You can't plan it.
Yeah, I mean how? Yeah, I mean how you're supposed to. You're right. You can't bottle lightning, can you? And it's
That's right.
music world. It's something positive about the way we can discover music these days with such a fast, hyper connected society. But at the same time, how do you, like you say, how do you get your music out there to the audience? Because there's so much to listen to. How are you even able to keep up with the mainstream releases that are happening every Friday? Because there's just so much music to get stuck into, it just ends up being a little bit overwhelming, doesn't it? And then you've really got to put your faith in the people that are going to champion the music, which is difficult.
Yeah. I kind of have like a policy for myself of just creating I want to just create a huge catalog of work that I feel is well put together,
Mm,
and I have a mentor who told me that he's an artist, like a visual artist, Preston Jackson, and he told me he's like, man, don't worry about now, just create
mm,
amazing work and keep it, and that'll turn
yeah,
into you know your cash, that'll turn into projects or different opportunities down the road. So
yeah,
because I'm sure for everything that that actually comes off a little bit, there will be a few other projects that just go by the wayside just because of output, just like you were
Of
saying.
course, yeah, and it's great if you can be the sort of musician that is proud of the work they do, because I'm sure there's musicians out there that, you've got to make a living at the end of the day, but I'm sure there's musicians out there that play for the paycheck and you do the same old gigs over and over again. I've been friends with session players who do wedding gigs every weekend, and you play the same old standards every single weekend, and you must get absolutely sick of it. And it's great that you're able to do what you're doing and throw out as much work as you can, but also be proud of what you're putting out as well.
Yeah, it's got to be that way.
Yeah, it has to be. You're right.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah.
has to be. It brings me on to an interesting question, actually. We talked about the fact that it can be very hard to get yourself out there, and with the internet now, how are you able to get yourself seen? I've noticed a lot of jazz musicians in 2016 released a lot of great records. I'm thinking of records like Henry Threadgill's "Old Locks and Irregular Verbs." That Jack Dijonette, Matthew Garrison, Ravi Coltrane record was great. Wadada Leo Smith did America's National Parks. There was loads of good records that came out last year, but I noticed that all of those players made the conscious decision not to include them on streaming services. And I know that your work, I know that Touch My Beloved's Thought is on Spotify and things like that. And I was wondering if you have an opinion on streaming services and their financial monopoly over the market, because I suppose it's much more difficult for jazz players to make money from the industry, and that's kind of hence you have the busy touring schedules, and I guess there's just something fairly anachronistic about the life of a jazz musician. Necessarily, it's involved, live performance is involved in it so much more than other forms of music. So I don't know. Did you make a conscious decision to have it on Spotify, or did you have to have that conversation with management or things like that?
Yeah, we had that conversation like right away, because Greenleaf has a good distributor called E1, and that was one of the first things I mentioned. I was like, well, can we keep it off of these sites that generally are ripping off the artists?
Yeah,
I mean, I look at my statements every month from them, and you get 5 cents. That means that somebody listened to your stuff, 30 times, and
yeah,
that ratio doesn't seem, correct to me. So,
no,
but they were like, well, this is what our distributor does, and we try to tell them to wait a little while, but that's not what they do. So,
mm,
so I just went with it. I would like to direct people more towards buying the record, buying the
of
entire
course,
record, because
yeah,
support the artists, come out
yeah,
to shows, and
yeah.
but I'm working with a larger organization, so sometimes you got to give something on some areas,
Yeah, of course. It's really difficult, isn't it? I find I was the sort of person when I was younger, I would buy every single record. My record collection's huge, but I would say if I'm being honest, over the past few years, I've bought less records. But what I've found is that if you look at my cache of records, they're all modern jazz records that I've bought, and it's probably, I don't know whether that consciously comes from the fact that, one, a lot of it isn't on streaming services, which I use sometimes, but not all the time. But also, I'm just so aware that you guys are out there putting out content that is so great, but so many fewer people appreciate it because of the fact that it's jazz. Jazz is not the most popular kind of music in the world anymore, is it? So I think I've always made that decision to go, I'm going to go and buy that record on Bandcamp, or I'm going to go and buy that album and support the artist. And I hope that musicians that do that, like musicians that we spoke about and yourself, if you're able to not get your stuff on streaming services, that you're still reaching an audience that are going to enjoy your music, because you guys deserve to make money out of it at the end of the day. You're making work that has heart and soul, so people should be buying it. And I completely understand those criticisms of streaming services, and I hope that we can come to a point in the future where the artist is higher up in the food chain than they currently are.
yeah, definitely. I wonder, 15 years down the line, or 5 years, when will they get it right, or will greed always kind of run
Yeah,
those decisions? I don't know.
it's hard, isn't it? Because technology's taken over and changed the industry completely. And I think you had what was the most recent streaming service? I can't even remember it now. It's Jay-Z's streaming
Title.
service. Yeah, Tidal. I mean, that had the intentions were there, but it just never took off. And I think it's difficult. They couldn't undercut a market that would, like Spotify and Apple Music, that are charging what, £10 a month. They're trying to charge 15, 20, but it's lossless music. It's FLAC, and it's got all of these things about it that music lovers would really appreciate. But the general population don't care what quality their MP3 file is, do they? They don't care if it's 128 or 320 or FLAC or Vorbis or whatever, whatever it's going to be. So it's like you're always going to be you're going for the niche of the market. So I think, unfortunately, it's only going to get, as on a bleak note, it feels like it's only going to get worse when it comes to streaming services and what they're going to charge, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, when you hear of companies like Pandora, being in court to try to pay less, it's like,
yeah.
Wait.
Yeah, what about the people that are creating the music? Those people should be earning the money, but it just never is that way, is it? And I mean, I would assume in terms of your career, it's the gigs, it's the going to gigs and that side of it that ends up being the financial staple, rather than putting the CDs out and the vinyl out.
Sure. I mean, I guess vinyl would be the place to go now. Like I've traveled quite a bit, and everybody wants vinyl. But that's in itself like has created difficulty. Like all the shops are backlogged with records, so you can't get your product fast enough. And then once you finish selling the records, like you can only carry maybe 40 records with you, in a suitcase or something like that. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah, they do take up space, don't they? I think it's something like a 12-month delay on pressing plants now, isn't there? Because there's so many reissues are like the biggest thing now. I mean, everyone's getting their record reissued on vinyl, and it's just I just don't. It's so weird, isn't it? How we're so obsessed now with streaming culture, yet we've gone completely the other way physically, and we're going back to vinyl, which is such an unruly, heavy, space-taking item. But I think it's a positive thing, because it's once again making music it's making it. I don't know how to say it. It's just making it more of an experience, isn't it? You put a record on, and it's so much more. It gives you so much more than clicking play on your laptop. It's not the same, and it never will be.
That's right. Man, I have a funny story just about being on tour with great drummer Micaiah McCraven. I don't know if you're familiar with his music.
I haven't heard of him, no.
He's kind of having a great moment these days. Things are really going well for him. But we went out on his first tour for this record that he has, In the Moment, and we were finishing up the tour, and the records had been long sold, during this tour, and all he had was CDs left. And we were finishing in I believe in Amsterdam or Rotterdam, I forget exactly, but it was a festival there, and the people, he's like, I have these CDs for sale, and there's loud, response from the audience. We don't buy CDs, where's the vinyl, like screaming for it,
Give me vinyl or MP3. I don't want anything else.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, CDs. It's funny, they're becoming so obsolete. I mean, I'm right now recording this on my MacBook. There's not even a CD drive on it anymore.
That's right.
I mean, but having said that, I'm sitting next to a record player, so it's just the strangest thing, isn't it? It's like even tapes now. I mean, the tape music culture has seen such a resurgence in the last couple of years, and that's really interesting as well. You get bands that are able to physically release their music without the price of something like vinyl, because like we were saying, the pressing plants are delayed. It's very expensive to get actually a good pressing of your record, so why not go with tapes? But then the other thing with tapes is that they're very degradable. It's very difficult to get high quality tape pressing as well, tape recording. So yeah, it's so strange how these trends keep coming back around again, and I wonder if in 30 years we'll get CDs back again. That'll become the new vinyl. I don't know.
That would be funny. That would be very funny. It would
be funny. Yeah, you never know. I mean, it's going back to your record again. You were saying how it's based on a record from the past, yet it sounds very modern. That's one of the things I really love about the record, is it sounds like modern jazz. There's something about it. It has like a punch to it. It feels like the instruments The production's a really clean production as well. I noticed that the production feels really spacious between the instruments, and I like the fact that you decided to go with a more modern approach, and you didn't decide to go, okay, we're doing an album that's based on a record of the past, so we're going to retrofit the production. I like the fact that it's a very clean sound, but how much thought went into the production of the record from that side of things?
Well, we didn't even know we were going to record, like, up to like a week before, the live performance.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I think, Mike Reed, again, he's one of the producers, and he came in and the rehearsals were happening at his space, and he was just like, we have to record this. We have to record, and this was made possible by grant money, and
Yeah.
so the budget was spent on already on just rehearsals for the dancer. We had 15 dancers and a
Man.
10-piece band, and just space and time. The money was spent. He's like, we have to record this. Don't worry about it. Just be ready, And so we recorded three different ways, actually. Like, we recorded the dress rehearsal, and that was just stereo pairing, two mics in front of the band, at Constellation.
Yeah.
And then we recorded in the studio because we did a morning radio show. So we did a live performance, and that didn't feel good, because I felt like, I don't know, people just, sometimes when you get in a recording studio, people close up, and I felt like it wasn't the strongest performance. But the live show was, everybody clicked. It's just that thing.
Yeah.
It's like, it's game time. Everybody came to life, and we didn't even know that we were going to record that. I mean, it just happened. Like, Mike showed up with the recording, like, here.
You did this.
Yeah. He's just like, I have it. And then that's the record. So not much thought beforehand went into, the actual recording. It just magically happened. And I'm glad. And that's another thing is just, like a little bit of luck. Like, what if nobody recorded that? You know what
That's
I mean?
the thing. Yeah, it's very serendipitous, isn't it? And maybe that's why the record feels so organic as well, because like you say, it was a spontaneous thing and it captures a live performance. But it's funny because the record, when you listen through, I don't feel like I'm listening to like a live recording of something that's just been captured on the fly. Apart from I can't remember which track it is. It's about halfway through the record and it ends with clapping. And and you go, okay, no, hold on a second. Nah, this is actually live. This hasn't been individually tracked or anything like that. This is the synthesis of a live performance. And I guess that's what gives the record so much power. Yeah,
That's cool. Well, I'm glad that it comes off that way.
No, it definitely does. It definitely does. And I've introduced people. I think with the channel, a lot of people want to get into jazz, and it's a really difficult, unruly genre to get into because, as you know, you could start off with the early bop era. We could go to the era of hard bop in the late 50s, early 60s, or we could go straight to Bitches Brew. We could go to modern jazz, and I think people struggle with where to start. And I've recommended your album now to a number of people and said, look, if you want to listen to a piece of jazz that it celebrates the hard bop earlier days. It celebrates a legend like Mingus, but it's definitely a modern jazz album. Then you need to hear this, and I've been getting really positive responses from that, and I think it's a good gateway into jazz music and showing how celebratory and how organic jazz music can be, and also how emotive it can be as well. Like, there's a lot of pieces in your album where it's really emotive, and there's a lot of dynamic and contrast that's used, and I think people need to appreciate how I think I'm just a bit of a jazz head, and a lot of people are, and I wish more people were, to be honest. I'm sure you feel the same.
Me too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that would probably be better, but too many people like crap these days, don't they? So unfortunately we're there's a bit of a minority on that. I mean, just to kind of ask this of you, but the fact that we're talking about modern music, I've noticed in the last few years it's really interesting seeing modern music going back into ideas and forms of jazz music. I'm thinking of things like Kendrick Lamar's "To Pimp a Butterfly," or the jazz funk of Esperanza Spalding's new record, or even Bowie's collaboration with Donny McCaslin on Black Star. I mean, why do you think musicians are going back to jazz again?
I mean, jazz seems to be playing always kind of, being very current with the what's going on in social things, in society. And I don't know that it's always, it has the possibility to always be fresh, to always be current in some way, if you know how to look at it. Some people want to classify, I don't know, any music as one thing. Like, oh, well, that's jazz that's Duke Ellington. That's, or, or that's Charlie Parker. I know what jazz sounds like, but it has a very it's always developing, it's always changing. From the beginning, it started as, a music of, that combined a bunch of things, people dealing with hardship, in their conditions, and, in slavery in the South, and, a way of healing, or passing the time, or organizing,
Yeah.
and, and spread to all these different people, all these different immigrants coming in and contributing to those sounds, and then that developing and become, and then you have like different musics coming in, like classical music changing the colors and orchestration and placement of jazz. And I still think that that's happening today, like where now we have musicians all over the world who play jazz, and contribute to jazz in such a strong manner that now jazz is everything. It's in Indian classical music, and has strong roots in rock and roll, and strong roots in, like I play with a great bass player, Linda O, and she pulls from her Asian heritage and creates amazing music that I've never even heard of, but now that's a part of the jazz sound. So I think just that pattern of people coming together and contributing, their voice from their experience, their heritage, their personal experience, their personal pain. That's kind of it's a model for great music, So people come back to that. People come back to, man, what, look, this is how it worked. Let's try that again, or let's look at what people did and see if we can find something rich once again, So
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. It's funny how though so many people perceive jazz as that dusty genre of music from another day, isn't it? Because it's like the original form of progressive music. It was so influential and trailblazing when it first appeared, and to me it doesn't sound anything but that now. It still sounds trailblazing, it still sounds trend-setting, and it's funny how people seem to put it in that box. It happens all the time, and it's really sad. Especially, we've just mentioned a number of artists that use jazz, and people almost don't even notice or understand the roots of jazz that are in the music that they love, and it's just so part of our life. And also, yeah, like you say, the cultural struggle, and an album like To Pimp a Butterfly, that was such a political record that was centered around what's happening in America in 2015. Yet that throwback style of music, it fits that culture and that political sort of apoplexy so well. And it's yeah, I think I'm just saying the same point again, but man, people just need to hear more jazz. That's what it is. I think it would solve the world's problems,
Yeah. More jazz, and be more open to, or just let's not put things in boxes. Let's just look at them. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's not be so obsessed with putting a label on everything.
Right.
That's something I've struggled with a little bit with music. I've always been a long time music fan, and having to do some of these genre guides on the channel, I find you have to analytically listen to the type of music and decide what box you're going to put it in, and it ruins the naturalism and the quality of some music by having to put a label on it, doesn't it? I mean, why do we have to attribute a 5-word label onto a specific type of music just so we can put it into some sort of framework to understand it. And sometimes music's just, it transcends those ideas, doesn't it? And we just don't box everything, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I have a
Yeah.
friend, Jeff Parker. You know Jeff Parker, great guitarist.
Yeah, I recognize the name, yeah.
Yeah, and he's in a band called Tortoise. You know, like kind of a big post rock band, or I don't
Oh,
even know what
man.
you would call them these days.
Yeah,
But
man. They are, their last record, I can't remember what the record was called now. It came out last year.
yeah,
Ah, I can't, yeah, it's a really good record, actually. And they're just such an unbelievable band. They've done so much in their time, haven't they?
well, he was telling me about. Well, there used to be a band before, I think before Tortoise called Isotope 217 or something like that, with Rob Mazurek, great trumpet player, composer, and Matt Lux, bassist. And I think he told me that, you know, because before I made my first record, I would talk to all these people like, how can I make a record? How can I get
Yeah.
this out? How can I get a record deal? You know, just trying to figure out what would be the best plan of action. And so Jeff, he was telling me like his thing was that he's like it's all about the one sheet, you know. And I was just like, well, one sheet, I've never heard of this, you know. He's like, well, basically this is what's going to tell, you know, writers and you know record stores what to do with your music, you know. And he told me
Yeah.
that their story about the first record, how they basically on their one sheet they were just writing a bunch of spatial, you know, planetary stuff, you know, like they weren't talking about the music at all. They were talking about like, you know, it sounds like the rings of Saturn, you know, and all these different things that just, you know, maybe that's what they felt it sounded like, but it was not putting it in a box. And the
Yeah.
record was a huge success. It was
Yeah.
like all kinds of kids buying it. Like it was big. And then, so they do their second record and they team up with a label because
Yeah.
they did the record themselves first. So the
Mm.
second record, the label, well, they notice that they're not selling as many records. And so they get the one sheet, you know, after, you know, like well into the process of it being released. And they
Mm.
noticed that the label had, you know, said that the record was jazz fusion, you know.
Oh,
And
no.
so and so all
What a
these
turn off for so many
yeah,
people.
yeah, exactly. That's what happened, you know. So many folks are just like, well, I'm not buying a jazz fusion record, you know.
No.
But you know, I don't know. Maybe I
Yeah, so,
feel like it's changing. It's changing now because there's so many great things going on. You know, like it's hard to put a box on stuff, or you have to invent new boxes
yeah.
lately for what people are doing. So
Oh, definitely. I regularly get comments like, "Can you talk about the sea punk movement,
what?
or vaporwave, or
Wow.
witch house, or these insane new internet subgenres that aren't really, or they're like a mixture of aesthetic style and musical style, and they just keep coming up all the time. You know, the internet seems to breed, genres are being bred together, and these strange forms are coming out of it, and yeah, it's a really interesting thing. Like that's a really interesting story about Tortoise as well, because like you say, I mean, you could fit them into any box you wanted. I mean, you see Tortoise as a post rock band, but I'm sure that there was kids that were when they released those records in the '90s were listening to Nirvana that would also buy a Tortoise record, despite some people considering that like their label to be jazz fusion, even though I think that was probably slightly misguided label. But it's interesting how we seem to need to be able to label people.
Yeah, man.
It's just funny how Tortoise are one of those bands, like you say, that you could pigeonhole how you wanted. You could have the post rock label, the jazz fusion label, but at the end of the day, it's just great music. It doesn't really matter, you know.
That's right. That's right. And they built their audience that way. You know.
Yeah, yeah.
There's another band that has done the same thing for a much longer period called NRBQ. Have you heard of this? The New Rhythm and Blues Quartet.
Yeah, I have, and I
Yeah,
feel like I've heard a couple of records, but I
yeah.
can't remember which ones. Yeah.
But you know, like they've been around 40 plus years, and I just think it's amazing that you know I've played a few gigs with them, and you know they'll
Oh
play
man.
jazz, they'll play some country stuff, they'll play, you know, R&B. You know,
Yeah.
it's and their audience will fly from all over the country, you know, to hear their music. You know, because
Yeah.
that's just how they've built their audience the entire time. So it's
Yeah.
a beautiful thing. Yeah.
And it's amazing if you can do that, but like you say, it's going to take perseverance and luck as well. I mean, you think of bands like Public Image Limited. The only way they were able to ever get an audience was from the success of the Sex Pistols and a label taking the chance because of the success of that. Because otherwise, I don't think in the late 70s you're going to have management release a record like Metal Box. You know, just because it's so abrasive. You know, what kind of management company, what kind of record label in the late 70s would want to put that out? You know, I don't think anyone would. And you've just got to take those chances, haven't you? And you've got to, and that's again going back to the internet. Why it's such a positive place, or why it can be, because people can self-release stuff now. You can fully fund your own record without the need for a label to pigeonhole you and put you in a box. But yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna ask you a question. So I get a lot of questions from people that watch the channel, taking a big interest in the habits that people have to find music. So how you listen to albums. Do you have strategies you take to find new albums, or do you have little rituals like, sit down with your headphones on, put your record on, make a whiskey? I don't know. Do you have any little rituals for new music that you listen to? Do you go through those things, or do you gig so often you just don't have time?
Yeah, my listening situation, I would have to say, is not fancy, or even like recreational. I think
Really?
it's always like, this is the difference between my wife and I. I always tell her, like you listen for enjoyment, and she says that when she listens to certain things, like she listens to for like a sing along. She wants to sing along with the record,
Yeah.
and I tell her, like, I'm always listening to learn. Like to learn, like, how is this record put together, how, and like it's very analytical, and maybe it shouldn't be, but
Yeah.
I can't turn it
Yeah.
off. When I listen to beautiful music, I have to understand how it's put together, so
Yeah.
yeah. But I have other people in my corner encouraging me, like, oh, you need to get a great listening room, you need to get these speakers and
Yeah.
really
No.
enjoy yourself. I mean, I enjoy it, but I'm just so inside the music. It's hard to get to step back and just have fun listening to great records. But I'm
Yeah,
trying. But
it
I'm
must be
trying.
difficult. Yeah, yeah, you've got to give it a go, haven't you? You've got to give it a go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it must be very difficult because it's as much as you're obviously deeply passionate about music, it is your day job as well. And people that aren't professional musicians wouldn't. I mean, like myself, I play music, but I've never been a professional musician. I've enjoyed playing, and so I'm on the fringes of that. I can certainly sit and enjoy a record, um, without having to be overly analytical about it. But I can imagine if you're in it all the time, then you're going to want to know why. Not just, oh, that sounds nice, but why does that sound so nice? I need to synthesize that and know why.
Yeah.
And that's even more so with jazz as well, isn't it? Because it's such a complex form of music. It's not, you can't easily go, okay, well that's that time signature. We're in that key signature, and they're playing four chords. Done. There's nothing to analyze there. Whereas obviously a lot of jazz, certainly modern jazz as well, that's taking on loads of different modes and different genres and different ideas. You can get pretty damn complex, can't you? I mean, it's there's certainly a lot to analyze in it.
Definitely. And I'm such a big fan of classical music as well. Like I'm always studying and trying to pull the inner workings out of, to understand like how these great composers controlled these gigantic instruments,
Yeah.
called the symphony orchestra. And so that even more so on that level, like the forms are bigger, the orchestration is more vast, and there's more, I have problems listening to a lot of music because I want to listen to one thing and really understand it. So
Yeah.
it takes me a while to get on to the next thing. So
Yeah, no, definitely,
yeah.
definitely. And in terms of your own playing, do you get opportunity to perform in classical scenarios? Is that something you do alongside your jazz work, or do you tend to gravitate more towards the jazz side of performance?
Well, I'm doing. I've over the years, man, it's been. I would have to say like 10 years of doing this. I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of great musicians in Chicago, like especially musicians in the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, and who have given me opportunities to write music for them, and so that the interest has taken me into a lot of different places. My curiosity for classical music. So I've written things for chamber groups and performed them on the CSO chamber music series, and then I've written like kind of hip hop based works for full string orchestra and big band and a DJ, and I had a commission a while ago and for a concerto for jazz quartet and string orchestra, and so finding this balance and blending these worlds, that's my thing, trying to like get these different genres, different instrumentation, different improvisation ideas, and putting them together to make something that's fresh. So I'm very curious about about a lot. So like I've kind of built my career this way, where I can put these worlds together. So I get a lot of opportunities to play with different musicians and from different styles all the time, in different settings, But I'm trying to create more opportunities where I'm presenting these works where we're blending these things together more frequently, rather than just like commissions or big concerts, or I would love that to be the thing that I did all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, pretty much. I mean, I think we're probably pretty much coming to a close, and I just want to implore the people that are listening that's listened to the journey you've had and listened to the music that you've made, to go and check out the record you released last year and get into some of the stuff you've done, because it's honestly, it's a really exciting place, and I'm excited to see what you end up doing next, coming off of the back of listening to Touch My Beloved's Thought, and I pretty much know that record inside out now. Coming off of the back of that, whatever you're going to do next is a very exciting prospect. So I mean, I really look forward to hearing what you're going to do.
Yeah. Well, there's some good stuff coming, and I look forward to sharing with you soon. Yeah.
We'll certainly be keeping an eye out on Deep Cuts. And one more, I'm going to give you one task before I let you go. So the first video I ever did on the channel was 5 albums to get you into jazz, and that was the beginning of the channel, really, because I thought, I know a lot of people struggle to get into jazz, so let's give them 5 records to get into. Sorry to put you on the spot. What 5 albums would you recommend someone to get into jazz?
Okay, so when I was a kid, I only had a couple records, so I have to start with these first 2 records that I had. This is a compilation, but it's a great compilation.
Okay.
Charlie Parker, I think it's the Verve Jazz Masters series. Mm-hmm. That's a great one. And then also Cannonball Adderley's Verve Jazz Masters. That is a great compilation. That's 2. Let me see. Oh, I mean, just this blend of what I really like, putting different worlds together. I would say that this is Charlie Parker again, but Bird with Strings. If you haven't heard that, it's beautiful. And let's move on to something else. How about Milestones by Miles Davis?
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great record. Interesting choice though, because I think people always go for an obvious Miles Davis choice, but that's a much more interesting choice.
Yeah.
Outside of Kind of Blue or Sketches of Spain or whatever.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Yeah.
And what is it? That's 4. Let me see. One more, and maybe I'll give you one more Miles Davis record that I really like. That's kind of lush. Porgy and Bess. Which is, Gil Evans, one of their projects together. That's just just super amazing, lush, and you can relate that to Gershwin music, and so that kind of gives you an entrance into jazz world in a few different ways. So.
Yeah, good educative. That's a hard word. Educative album to start you on jazz, definitely. You didn't say Greg Ward, Touch My Beloved's Thought. I gave you an opportunity, Greg. Well, you didn't take it.
I'm sorry. Those are you got to go to the masters first, and then when you're done with that, then you can check out my record. So.
There we go. Exactly. Well, Greg, it's been an absolute pleasure. Really enjoyed talking to you, and you've got to come to the UK. We've got to make it happen somehow. Definitely got to make it happen, yeah.
Well, thanks, Oliver. I appreciate the time, man.
No, thank you. Thanks for that, man. Really enjoyed it.
Cool.
See you later.
All right.